A single photograph is creating a new round of questions in the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. Not because investigators have publicly announced a breakthrough, not because anyone has been charged with a crime, and not because the photograph tells us exactly what happened, but because the image reportedly captures a moment that some people believe does not fit neatly with the explanation that has been discussed since Lynette vanished in the Bahamas. For months, one of the most repeated details in this case has been the account that Lynette somehow ended up in the water after reportedly bouncing from a dinghy during a nighttime trip near the Sea of Abaco. That explanation has been at the center of countless discussions, interviews, search efforts, and online debates. Now, a newly discussed photograph has people taking another look at that story. The image itself is simple. At first glance, it may not seem remarkable. But according to people closely following the case, the details visible in the photograph have sparked fresh conversations about what was happening aboard Soulmate in the days and hours before Lynette disappeared. And for a family still waiting for answers, every new detail matters. Lynette Hooker was known by friends and family as an adventurous woman who embraced life on the water. Together with her husband Brian Hooker, she spent years traveling and living aboard their sailboat, Soulmate. The vessel became more than transportation. It became their home. Photos shared over the years showed tropical anchorages, turquoise water, quiet marinas, and sunsets stretching across the Bahamas. From the outside, it appeared to be the kind of lifestyle many people dream about. Then everything changed. According to Brian's account, he and Lynette were returning by dinghy after spending time ashore when an accident occurred. He has maintained that Lynette entered the water and disappeared. Search efforts began. Boats responded. Aircraft searched. Volunteers joined the effort. Residents across the Bahamas paid attention to the case. But despite extensive searches, Lynette was never found. That fact alone has continued to trouble many people. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Yet no confirmed trace of Lynette surfaced. No confirmed sighting. No confirmed location. No recovery. And that absence has fueled ongoing questions. That wasn't the only thing people noticed. As investigators continued their work, a growing number of witness accounts began entering the public conversation. Some involved reported FLIR sightings. Others involved sounds heard near the water. Some involved observations from people who lived and worked around Marsh Harbor and Hope Town. Each account added another piece to a timeline that remains incomplete. According to people familiar with the area, the waters surrounding the Sea of Abaco are busy. Boats travel between islands every day. Tourists arrive and leave. Residents move between docks, marinas, and settlements. In a place like that, unusual activity often gets noticed. That is one reason witness statements have received so much attention. But there was another detail. The photograph now drawing attention reportedly shows equipment and conditions aboard Soulmate that some observers believe deserve a closer look. Again, it is important to be careful. A photograph captures a moment. It does not automatically explain that moment. It does not tell investigators what happened before or after the shutter clicked. Still, photographs can preserve details that become important later. Investigators know this. That is why images often become part of major investigations. People study backgrounds, objects, positions, equipment, weather conditions, everything visible inside the frame. According to people discussing the image, certain details visible aboard Soulmate appear different from what some expected based on public descriptions of events. The exact significance of those details remains unclear. Investigators have not publicly explained how they interpret the photograph. But the image has become a topic of conversation. At that point, the family had questions. For Lynette's loved ones, the focus has never changed. They want answers. They want to know what happened. They want to understand how a woman could disappear without leaving behind clear evidence. Family members have repeatedly spoken about their determination to keep attention on the case. Because when public attention fades, investigations can become harder. Witnesses stop coming forward. Memories become less reliable. Potential evidence becomes more difficult to locate. That is why every new development receives attention. Meanwhile, search efforts continued. Even long after the initial emergency response ended, people remained interested in locations connected to the case. Maps were reviewed. Distances were calculated. Travel routes were examined. Boaters familiar with the region discuss currents and conditions. Marine experts weighed in on what might happen if someone entered the water in a particular location. According to several individuals familiar with the area, the geography around the Sea of Abaco presents both opportunities and challenges for searchers. On one side, there are stretches of relatively protected water. On the other, currents and weather can quickly change conditions. Understanding exactly where someone entered the water can dramatically affect search planning. That raised another question. How precise is the publicly known timeline? Timelines matter in every missing person case. Investigators want to know where people were, when they were there, who saw them, what they were doing. Even small differences can become important. Over time, multiple witness accounts have emerged discussing events from the night Lynette disappeared. Some accounts have focused on timing. Others have focused on observations. Still others have focused on conversations that reportedly occurred after the incident. Each account contributes information, but not every account agrees perfectly with every other account. That is common in investigations. Witnesses remember things differently. People interpret events differently. Sometimes memories improve. Sometimes they become less certain. Investigators must sort through all of it. That process takes time. But there was another detail. The boat itself remains one of the most discussed pieces of this case. Soulmate has become more than a sailboat. It has become a focal point. Photographs of the vessel have circulated widely. People have studied the layout, the cockpit, the deck, the dinghy arrangements, the equipment stored aboard, the living quarters below deck. According to federal authorities, investigators later spent significant time examining the vessel. That development immediately drew attention because many people wanted to know what investigators were looking for. Authorities have not publicly released every detail, and that is not unusual. Investigations often require privacy while evidence is being reviewed. Still, the examination of Soulmate became one of the biggest developments in the case. And now, discussions surrounding this photograph have brought attention back to the boat once again. Some observers believe the image provides additional context. Others believe people may be reading too much into it. At this stage, neither conclusion has been publicly confirmed. But the conversation continues. Meanwhile, witnesses continued coming forward. One of the recurring themes in this case has been the number of people who say they observed something unusual around the time Lynette disappeared. Some described lights. Some described sounds. Some discussed activity on the water. Others recalled conversations that took place afterward. Investigators routinely evaluate witness information. Sometimes it becomes important. Sometimes it does not. But each account must be examined carefully, because occasionally one small detail helps explain a much larger mystery. That wasn't the only thing people noticed. Questions have also continued surrounding the reported efforts to seek help after Lynette disappeared. The exact sequence of events remains a subject of discussion. When did certain actions occur? Who saw what? When were emergency signals reportedly used? How long did various movements take? These questions continue appearing because people are trying to understand the timeline. And until investigators release additional findings, many of those questions remain open. According to individuals familiar with marine emergencies, every minute matters when someone enters the water. Weather matters. Visibility matters. Water temperature matters. Current direction matters. Distance from shore matters. Even small details can influence survival and search outcomes. That reality has remained at the center of conversations surrounding Lynette's disappearance. For her family, however, the issue is much simpler. They want Lynette found. Everything else comes second. A photograph, a witness statement, a timeline discrepancy, a search map. All of those things matter only because they might eventually help explain what happened to their loved one. That human element can sometimes get lost when people discuss investigations online. Behind every headline is a real family. Behind every theory is a real person who disappeared. And behind every question is someone waiting for answers. But there was another detail that kept drawing attention back to the photograph. People often think of photographs as objective evidence. In some ways they are. But they can also be misleading. An image captures only one angle, 1 second, one perspective. That is why investigators rarely rely on photographs alone. Instead, they compare images with witness accounts, electronic records, physical evidence, and timelines. Only then can a photograph be understood in context. That process may already be happening. Investigators have not publicly discussed everything they know. In fact, much of what authorities know in this case remains confidential. That is normal during active investigations. The public sees only a fraction of the information available to investigators. Meanwhile, people following the case continue examining every development, every photograph, every interview, every witness statement, every official action, because they hope one of those details will finally provide clarity. As months pass, the unanswered questions become harder to ignore. Where is Lynette? What happened during the final hours before she disappeared? Why have search efforts failed to locate her? And what role, if any, might this newly discussed photograph play in helping investigators understand those events? For now, those questions remain unanswered. The image has generated discussion. It has generated speculation. It has generated debate. But it has not generated definitive answers. At least not publicly. And that is where the case stands today. A missing woman. A family still searching. Investigators still working. Witnesses continuing to come forward. And a photograph that has caused many people to take another look at a story they thought they already understood. Whether that photograph ultimately proves important remains to be seen. Investigators may determine it changes nothing. Or they may determine it helps explain something significant. At this point, the public simply does not know. But the attention surrounding the image shows how closely people continue following this case. Because every new detail brings renewed hope that answers may finally emerge. And perhaps the biggest question of all is this. If the photograph truly captures details that do not align with public assumptions about the events surrounding Lynette's disappearance, what exactly are investigators seeing when they study that image? That question remains unanswered. What do you think? Do you believe photographs can sometimes reveal important details that witnesses miss? Or do you think the most important answers in this case will ultimately come from physical evidence and investigative findings? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're following the Lynette Hooker case, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future developments as investigators continue working to uncover what happened to Lynette Hooker.